Hello, and welcome to the Inside Track, the podcast where we chat about all the things that give you the edge in the world of innovation, business, design, tech, and culture. I'm Fuzlin Esau, and today we're joined by Toby Rogers, head of product here at Hedgehog Lab, as well as a new voice. Welcome, Clarke, chief design officer here at the lab. As always, before we jump in, Ray, I would love to know a little bit more about you and your journey with Hedgehog.
Firstly, hi everybody. Yeah, as Fuzlin said, I'm Ray. I'm Chief Design Officer here at Hedgehog Lab, and I think that's a very overarching title. But what it really means is that I oversee our research, our design, and our product teams, and I work as part of the C-suite as I say the voice of design, but the voice of research, design, and product within the business, and on that C-suite team for design governance and make sure that design really has a seat at the table here at Hedgehog Lab. So that's been something that's been part of my journey in the 12 years I've been here at Hedgehog Lab now. So when I say that, the people are like, "Wow, 12 years, you've been there forever." Not quite forever, but certainly kind of joined the Hedgehog Lab journey. I think around about 6 years into the co-founder's journey. And my backstory is that I had set up my own design agency with a long-term, lifelong friend. We both walked away from an agency we were working at for probably around 9, 10 years. There was talk of redundancies, and we are thinking, right, if there's talk of, we're going to take it, and kind of literally took it. And the next day, set up a small web agency here in the Northeast. And about 18 months later, two chancers rocked up further down the corridor, and here was Hedgehog Lab. So Sarat and Mark turned up with a couple of patio chairs and like a plank of wood to put their laptops on, and I'm like, okay, interesting. So we got to know each other across that first couple of years working from that small incubator business space, and started passing work back and forward. Um, Hedgehog Lab very much in the early days being software engineers, and we were doing a lot of front end design and front end build. I'll not say UX; it probably wasn't even the term that we were using at the time. It was web design and kind of web build. And my business partner fell out of love with client services. I mean, we were a client services agency, so not the greatest of kind of moves for us. But yeah, Jamie wanted to go in more of an academic direction at the time, left the business, and I started a conversation with Sarat and Mark to kind of really talk about how design could fit at Hedgehog Lab. There was no plan, no instruction manual. There was one or two designers at the time, but they were still students. Again, a very small kind of growing design team, but there was no direction, no plan, no agenda. It was a case of me landing and kind of, okay, we need a design practice. We need to figure a lot of stuff out. Have you got a plan? No, I don't have a plan. Do you have a plan? No, we don't have a plan. So I was very much kind of getting to know each other and to kind of set the landscape when I walked in the door. There was kind of me, like I say, as the voice of design, and 15 software engineers staring back. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. What do you do? And I'm like, what do you do? So we had to kind of find out what we all did and really kind of cement. I said design practice at Hedgehog Lab. Yes, we had some good young designers, but as a design practice, there just wasn't the design practice. We were at the time throwing together some screens and some assets and throwing them to devs and hoping for the best. I mean, very, very ropey practice at the time, but it was what kind of everybody else was doing. I don't think industry really had a firm grasp of kind of how these areas came together. There was a lot of agencies doing a good job, and a lot of agencies really finding their feet and understanding how these different roles and disciplines kind of came together and really fed that software engineering and production line. And that was the journey I went across the first 3 or 4 years at Hedgehog Lab, really understanding where my design background in product design and in industrial design, luckily the theoretical approaches of, I guess, market and user research, prototyping, testing, and then committing to a build of a product I mean, that's what we do today in software development. Luckily, I came from that industrial design background, and that's what my kind of core skills were. So transferable skills, I guess, luckily, and managed to kind of figure the rest out kind of in flight as we went across those first 3 or 4 years.
Love it. Awesome. So let's jump in for to our first question, and it is a design one. So it's been, I think, just over a month since Claude Design was introduced into the world, making quite a big splash amongst designers, and it raised quite a bit of concerns, but also was like people were so excited to kind of get stuck in and do things. It's now sort of only a month later entering into partnership with Canva and Adobe to sort of assuage some of those concerns by saying that they're not going anywhere. We're just adding on additional resources. So this paired with the recently emerging sort of Franken jobs, such as AI Imagineers, design crafters, and builders, where the output for designers has been sort of differentiated around taste rather than um, just sort of a clean output. Um, how much do you think over this sort of, I guess, few months has AI influenced design and design practices? And is it having a major impact on how we see designers both within the work that they're doing and even how we define them as designers?
Yeah, I think even winding it back even further, the I think the way designers are working with AI has changed drastically over the last 18 months. And again, there's been many, I guess, horizons in that last 18 months as well. And I think the way you termed it, Fuzzling, that kind of Franken role or kind of Frankenstein's monster of kind of what are designers these days, I think is still a little bit of a grey area. I think thankfully there's some clarity coming. But again, I think reflecting to my story of coming into Hedgehog Lab and finding out what design as a practice does in our business, it's very much about us as a design team. Now, as a mature design team, 12 years on, we understanding how AI affects our design practice. It hasn't replaced designers, nor I don't think it could or should, but it's certainly kind of gave us 18 months of experimentation to get to a place. And I'll explain a little more around kind of the shaping around that. I think kind of just winding back again, maybe just in line with my backstory a little bit as well. If you think back to like the early 2000s, digital design, certainly web design, was almost kind of the space and territory of webmasters. So again, a very grandiose title, but it really kind of meant not a single point of failure, but I guess a single point of some person doing all of the things as a webmaster, like a single role within industry. Webmaster was coding, creating content, adding images, doing all the things, launching the site. So again, a very singular kind of role. Um, Across that time span, kind of into um, sort of the 2010s, certainly I think digital design had matured into a much more multifaceted and multi-rolled kind of team approach where you like one person wouldn't be able to work at the scale that was required. So you would have, certainly from a design point of view, multiple roles. You would have a UX designer, you would have a UI designer, you would have a content designer, you would have a UX researcher, you would have a service designer, and you would have a product owner or manager. So again, the roles and teams had expanded quite often to 6 to 8 on a team, and that was just in that kind of user-centered design space. Before you added any devs, you already had a team of kind of 6 to 8 folks really kind of pushing that design landscape forward. With AI on the scene, like I say, probably if we went back to 2 year ago, I mean, um, it was everything was to be AI enabled was the big voice at the time. But I think there was so many things out there to enable all of the things with AI. It was just complete wild west. Certainly in the design landscape, there was so many choices out there. Again, things coming to the market like Lovable, Figma Make was coming on the scene, and there were so many just different variants of what promised to be the next big thing in UX and UI design, and the robots would be doing all of the UX and all of the UI in 12 months' time. And kind of we were like, oh God, what's happening here? The teams looking at each other. Not are our jobs safe, but what are our jobs now, and what are our roles now? And at the time, we were like, yeah, I mean, it's business as usual, but suddenly we have this super powerful technology that can kind of stretch your design chops across multiple areas.
Similarly to the stuff that Ray's talked about, I think AI is super empowering for people who understand and know what they're doing, which is something that we've talked about a few times over the last few weeks. But I think what's interesting here is we're talking about kind of design thinking versus design process and tooling. And I think it's the same for kind of product as well, where kind of AI has massively disrupted the process of designing products in terms of the tools we use and the flows that we go through and how far you can lean into uh, kind of the engineering side. And it's the same for product. We've now gone from product managers being people who thought about and wrote user stories in requirements documents, and then that moved through design and through engineering to people who can actually get quite far into that design and engineering process. But I think that doesn't kind of negate the skills you need to be a like really strong product person or kind of customer centric product person. I think that the Canva thing is super interesting because Canva are kind of talking about empowering small businesses to do design because they can hook up Canva through kind of the AI tools and they can kind of go through that process. But just because it enables them to do the design output and create design artifacts, it is not empowering them to actually do design thinking. And I think that's the difference here. I think over the course of the last 12 to 18 months where we've been kind of experimenting and utilizing different AI tools, what we've absolutely realized is that the tools are tools that enable you to get better and faster at your existing process. They're not going to replace the kind of judgment, taste, understanding, and experience that you had beforehand. A really, really good product designer or product manager essentially holds an entire mental model of their product in their head. They understand what kind of the user motivations are. They understand their audience. They understand uh, how their design system works. They understand the decisions that they've made in the past that have led them to the point that they've got to now. And you can load your AI tools with kind of your entire design system, all of the historical user research that you've got, all of the kind of problems that you're trying to solve, and it can churn out something that is a decent approximation of where you might have got to, but it doesn't have that kind of thinking and that mental model to work from. And I think as AI tools begin to commoditize the process of product and design, we're going to be seeing more kind of value and need for the people who can make sense of the user experience and the human behavior and that human centered bit that enables us to get to the product and the product design that actually has an impact. So I think that's kind of where we're leaning quite hard. I think it goes back to the thing that I talked about a couple of weeks ago about you can give everybody the same camera, but you can't make everybody a great photographer. It's the skill and experience that you bring to that. And I think AI is helping us become kind of like 10x sort of generalists, but that's because we've got that experience already. I think if you haven't got that experience, it just allows you to churn out mediocre stuff at a faster pace.
So, on to our next topic. Red Magic is a newcomer to the smartphone market, and it's pulling out all the stops for a gaming smartphone. Um, sort of a supercharged phone that you can play all kinds of things on. Um, is this or is there a market for these type of niche, powerful devices? Or is this a perceived power of choice situation? And I think probably the biggest question is, would you take your gaming over to mobile? Your serious gaming?
I don't think I quite get what Red Magic is trying to do with the device, if I'm honest. Um, I'm a, yeah, I'm I'm still a gamer. I still play a lot of FC 26 Ultimate Team. That's like my thing. I've been playing FIFA since like FIFA 95 on the Mega Drive. Uh, but apart from kind of a sweet spot back in the sort of early App Store days when there were like some really good mobile games like Super Stickman Golf and some other very cool, fun stuff, I kind of feel that like mobile gaming is a lot of infinite runner type games with millions of ads in that my kids get annoyed at because there've millions of ads in them. I didn't even realize or think there was kind of like a market for mobile esports kind of stuff. And if there is, then I thought it was games like Marvel Snap and stuff like that. I thought, how much kind of hardware power do you really need to be able to play competitive Marvel Snap? I mean, I play Fortnite quite a bit with my kids, and I get annoyed that I keep getting killed by a 5-year-old. But I don't think I'd play it on mobile, even if I had like the most powerful mobile in the world. But so, but what I think actually is really interesting for this is that it's not. I don't think it's about the kind of Red Magic device as a like super high spec gaming device. It's it is kind of like a different device, and I think the different thing is really interesting. And I think you can kind of generate a lot of interest and a lot of kind of noise by being different in kind of the smartphone space. I think it used to be that new iPhone announcements were like super exciting and everybody wanted to watch to see what was going to be the next thing that they were going to do. Now it's just I've got a slightly better camera and we still haven't integrated Siri into ChatGPT. So I think Red Magic can kind of occupy a space that other phone manufacturers have kind of left, which is doing cool and exciting stuff. And I imagine people who are moving towards kind of buying it are doing it because they want to be in that space where they've got something cool and exciting that other people haven't got. I don't see it as a thing that is like we're suddenly going to people are suddenly going to shift all of their gaming stuff onto mobile. And I don't think you buy it because you're like an esports kind of serious gamer. I think you buy a really good PC or stick with your Xbox or PlayStation 5.
I mean, I'm not a big gamer anymore. I'm more kind of shouting at my kids to get off their consoles because they're kind of doing too much gaming, and then kind of very much pushing them back onto the consoles once I've had enough of the kids. So again, it's an interesting concept. The Red Magic phone being that kind of super powerful piece of hardware that you can do kind of hardcore gaming on. I think from a market point of view, I think it would really appeal to those PC modders and hardcore gamers who build their own kind of rigs at home, where they're quite happily spending thousands of pounds building their own bespoke boutique bit of gaming kit that kind of sits in their bedroom and glows neon colors and has enough fans on it to take it into hyperspace when it gets kind of over heated. But I think it's an interesting concept. Um, from an industrial design point of view, the hardware is impressive. I mean, if you look at it, the liquid cooling on device isn't unique, but it's something that's 10 years ago would be just absolutely mind bending to have a liquid cooling kind of component in a phone in your pocket. And when we're comparing that directly to iPhones right now, I think the Red Magic device is impressive, and it's very much will enable that kind of gaming space, or it should. But when you compare it to the iPhone, again, I think on paper it looks strong, but um, the only area that it's not kind of comparable with an iPhone and other devices seems to be its camera when I've looked at the tech. And I think a lot of the market now, I mean, doesn't even expect, I mean, having a great camera to feed photographs and videos and audio into all your social media platforms is a given. So again, it seems to be lacking some of that kind of taken for granted BAU feature sets that iPhones and other Android devices have. But I think very much it's a gamer's device. So if that's your thing, I think this could be your phone or your thing. But kind of looking back historically, we've been here before with this kind of gaming and phone handheld kind of device. If you think back to maybe the early 2000s, again we had devices like Nokia's N-Gage and Sony Ericsson's Xperia Play, where again they were doing the same thing, but for me none of them quite broke through as a real smash hit gaming device experience. They very much think didn't break that console market. I'm not saying they were directly aimed at that console market to be a disruptor, but I just don't think they got the mass adoption of being a kind of great all-in-one device. I think across the two, in either instance, it was either a good game experience and a poor phone experience, or a good phone experience and a poor game experience. So again, I think that's the key. And I think if you look at where those devices are now, and if we're thinking from a sustainability point of view, I think I'm not saying they were a flop, but they didn't kind of, they're not they're not around your house now. They're very much landfill. They've kind of vanished from that kind of landscape. But I think the concept of this duality in a device from a sustainability point of view is a great idea. If you think about the original iPhone, a lot of the componentry that had uh, digital cameras at the time had the same components. So from a hardware development point of view, it was, I don't know, this sounds naive of me saying, but it was quite easy to kind of have those two contexts together because they shared the same hardware, big screen, a rudimentary camera, sharing the same circuit board and sharing the same battery. Again, that was quite a short horizon to bring those two things together, a phone and a digital camera, kind of that went together really quite seamlessly at that time. But I just think I'm wary of this. It's not my bag, to be fair. So again, I think this could be very much 2030's landfill, or you will see it in the front window of CEX in 2030 as a kind of a device that you've passed on because it's kind of okay at being a gaming platform and okay at being a phone, but it's not brilliant at being both. But I'm skeptical, and again, it's not quite my bag. But I think it's interesting that this um, kind of domain space has come around again when we've had smartphones for the last 20 years or so doing the smartphone thing really well. Everybody's dipped their foot into gaming on smartphones, music on smartphones, and again, here we are on that kind of carousel again. So for me, the jury's out a little. It's an impressive bit of kit, yes. Will it get the mass market appeal from those kind of bedroom PC modders? I mean, probably that's their thing. But will it then take it to disrupt the gaming industry to that next level? Let's see. It hasn't. It hasn't historically. So again, it's interesting to see that people, that the organization Red Magic is investing in this area again.
The next question is all around kind of getting stuck in sort of creative ruts. So we've all been stuck in a bit of that creative rut from time to time. And I think piece that we recently came across talks about how creative rituals can be the best defense against this feeling. The writer of this particular article sort of suggests returning back to your foundations and habits, reclaiming your attention span. That's a big one. Um, or setting interventions to jumpstart for when you're really stuck. So, as leaders yourselves, what are some of those rituals and habits that you find has helped both you and your teams to really get out of those um, creative ruts?
My personal approach to this, which I do share with the team when asked, but I think kind of as creatives, maybe you've got your own go-to
Mm.
spaces as individuals that maybe don't cross-pollinate as easily as just saying, oh, go and do that, and then you find the answer 20 minutes later. I don't think it ever kind of works like that. But I think certainly in the kind of in my space, in that digital design space, it's really about often putting the screen down and getting rid of the digital again, kind of getting away from a lot of the media, the screen glare, the constant being switched on 24 hours a day to work mode just because you can, because you're enabled to. So again, just because you feel your phone vibrate, you feel like you've got to whip it out and answer that email or answer that Slack message. And again, I think you need to kind of just put the digital stuff down and kind of reclaim your headspace. And I think it's simple things like taking the dog for a walk. I mean, one of the great things for me working from home is I take the dog for a walk 3 times a day before I start in the morning, lunchtime, and then when I finish on an evening. It allows me to kind of just, get ready for the day, reset halfway through the day, and then kind of almost get rid of the day at the end of the day by having a mad cocker spaniel drag me through the local park. You suddenly quickly forget about all of that stuff during the day. So it's great for snapping you out of that work mode a lot of the time. But I think kind of the things I do personally, let me think, are more around tangible things. I think I often kind of talk about myself being kind of an analog guy in like a digital world, and kind of where I kind of revert to is often some of the things I was doing in my youth. So again, kind of the subcultures I was passionate about when I was younger, I'm kind of still keenly interested in and dive into to kind of find that grounding and that foundation and that little bit of mental reset. So music, kind of BMXing, skateboarding, those kind of things that I was super passionate about and still keenly interested in. Don't get me wrong, I'm not flying around the local BMX track or skate park these days, but I still have a lot of the kit I had when I was kind of 18 or so. So I've still got a good collection of kind of late 80s, 90s skateboards at home that I whip out and embarrass the kids with at every opportunity on a weekend. And one thing I found a real kind of rekindled interest in, I think rekindled's maybe the wrong phrase, but when I was growing up, vinyl was expensive. Vinyl records were expensive, and cassettes were relatively cheap in comparison. So I grew a great cassette-based music collection, but cassettes uh, are good, but they don't have the theatre of kind of playing a vinyl for me. They don't have the ritual of buying the record. You get the artwork at kind of 12-inch size, and kind of you've got to get off your backside and open the turntable and dust the record down and do all of the things, and then you sit down and listen to it. There's a theater and a ritual to it, which I think's a lot more kind of enjoyable over cassettes and digital media when it comes to music as well. So I found myself like rebuying tons of stuff I've already got on cassette, CD, and MP3 and digital formats as vinyl, just probably because I enjoy the theater of it as much as that kind of audiophile experience. It kind of snaps me out of that digital space. So I found myself kind of reinvesting in subcultures that I've enjoyed across my years on the planet, and getting into stuff that I couldn't maybe get into when I was younger because of just financial situations of growing up on a council estate in the northeast, and kind of, you couldn't afford a vinyl which was 15 quid, so you bought a cassette which was 10 quid, which was simple kind of economics at the time. So again, just kind of refining and relearning a lot of that space is kind of where I go for kind of that little bit of digital switch off and reset and shut down.
Ray's kind of said all of the exact same things I would probably say. So I think kind of getting outside and getting away from a screen is kind of super powerful for a bit of a creative reset and doing stuff that's just fun. So interesting to hear Ray talking about kind of skateboarding and BMXing and stuff.
I need pictures of that at some point.
I've got a few skateboards in my garage, and my little boy, like last year or something, he's like, I want to learn to skateboard. Like, right, I can probably help you with that. So there's a skate park just at the end of my street. So me and my son have like skated around that a little bit, and I'd been doing that a bit on the lunchtime as well, just to get a bit of a reset as kind of like the old guy walking down to the skate park with a skateboard and stuff like that. It's really cool to kind of reset where you're at. I think there's a guy called George Shultz who was Secretary of State for Ronald Reagan, and he had a ritual that ended up being called the Schultz Hour, where like obviously he was like insanely busy being kind of the right hand man to Ronald Reagan. He would like leave his desk and leave his office for at least an hour every week, just with like a notepad and a pen, and say like, nobody can bother me apart from my wife or the president, and would sit and just like write down kind of what he was thinking about and do the kind of free writing thing. And I do that quite a lot when I'm sort of overwhelmed with stuff. And like where the skate park is at the end of my street, it's also like a outdoors adventure thing for the scouts. And on a nice day, you can just go and sit on the grass and just sit with a notebook and write stuff down. And I find writing as a way to kind of think through stuff has always been my kind of go-to. I'm quite happy to just sit with a pen and a blank page and just write what comes out, and I end up finding loads of connections and creative ideas and stuff. And I think it's Steve Jobs who said that creativity was just connecting dots together, and that's kind of been my thing. I've been doing quite an interesting sort of digital thing for it though. I've always liked the idea of what you call a swipe file as like a copywriter or a marketer, where you like collect clippings of stuff that's interesting that you can use for other things. And when I was working as a music journalist, I had like, I think it's still under my bed. I've got a file full of clippings of like articles and stuff that I thought were really interesting, or kind of writing styles that I liked, or kind of approaches that I liked. And I've always ended up doing that in a kind of digital way. So I've been using an app called Sublime a lot lately, which is like a digital sort of swipe file that lets you kind of collect anything, a bit like Pinterest, but for the written word rather than pictures. So everything I've ever highlighted in Kindle is in there. Everything I've ever highlighted in an article that I've read through Readwise or whatever is highlighted in there. Screenshots and kind of stuff that I've clicked off the internet is all in there. And I've built a kind of connection with Claude Code onto it. So I've got this massive library of thousands of things that I've saved. And I'm like, if I'm feeling a bit stuck about something, I'm sitting and going, I'm thinking about this thing. What exists in my library that is related to this thing? And then get a load of really interesting signals and content back. But then I know that it's all stuff that I've captured, not so stuff that interested me or that I thought was useful in the first place. So that's been super powerful. I think in terms of like the team, my advice and the thing that I've always talked about is making sure you're trying to stay curious and giving yourself room for curiosity and doing whatever that kind of ritual is that enables you to kind of be curious and be creative and taking the space to do that.
That's a really great idea. I think that might help me. I might see that code from you because it might help me with all the tabs that I always have open. You call them my emotional support tabs because in case I need that information at any point. Um,
Yeah.
all it does is make my computer crash like every few months. So that's a really great thing to pull together. Also,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to see Ray on his skateboard.
I was going
Toby,
to
you as
say,
well.
yeah, I mean, without kind of, sounding like the cool kids and kind of alternative sports, I think kind of Toby's got his swipe collection of kind of digital archives, and I've got my emotional support shed. So where I keep bits of skateboards and bits of old bikes and bits of stuff that I'm like, oh God, I've had this from forever. Just shut yourself away in that for half an hour and you come out kind of cleansed again. So again, it's interesting how you find kind of solace in these different kind of areas. But I think uh, there's some super powerful stuff kind of, out there on YouTube as well, where you can kind of, I found, and again, I know kind of going off on one DIY and kind of renovation and kind of giving things a go. I found a lot of kind of comfort in as well. So just hitting things with hammers, building them back up and kind of renovating stuff. I found, a keen interest in kind of late in kind of my adult life. I mean, kind of my dad was a carpenter joiner, so I was always around that type of stuff, but never went into that kind of trade-based kind of journey as a profession. I've been around it, but then found out, hold on, bought a house, it's a wreck, it needs renovating, everything is a fortune. And you just start to find stuff on YouTube and on Amazon, and you're like, hold on, okay, I've watched the video, I've bought the tools and the kit. How hard can it really be? Some of it very hard, but some of it like, okay,
Oh, it's all right. Yeah.
and build that up. So again, interestingly, I found a lot of kind of headspace and tension release kind of in those kind of more tangible physical roles that, kind of I've been around all my life, but never been part of.
I'm a bit the same with that as well. So my granddad used to always like, build stuff. He'd like build like forts for us when we were kids and things like that. And he always had like a shed built onto the back of my grandparents' house, and he would just disappear for a while. And I think he obviously found solace in that space. And I think as I've got older, I've felt a bit of that as well. I mean, my thing is always like taking guitars apart and rebuilding them and like messing around with that sort of stuff. But my wife won't let me buy any more guitars.
It is a sort of like do things with your hands and
Yeah.
sort of get back into your body. And I think it's very much a I think it's the wellness term of the year. So to get back into your body, start doing things that are a bit more physical, and it really is a very helpful. I'm deathly afraid of my skateboards now because I'm just like convinced I'm going to break a hip. But it's there in case. So I've stuck to surfing because at least then if you fall, you're falling into the ocean instead of onto the ground. So it's a good sideways lateral move if you if you worry about that. But I'm just always worried about breaking a hip. Awesome. So thank you to both of you for joining me today. And thank you to everyone who's listening. To find out more about our sessions, our briefings, our product builders, all the network of experts, head on over to our website, our social channels, and of course, follow this podcast for more. We will see you all next week. Thank you very much.